Hey, my friends are here. Carrie and Deep Tea, how are you? Oh, and Keenan, how are you? Oh, can't hear me yet. How is everybody? How's everybody doing? Well, while you're trying to find the button to unmute yourself and say, I'm fine, I think we should dive right in because we haven't got a moment to spare. Now, what I like to do, I think you know, I like to take, hi, Rialta. I like to take requests if people have requests. So I always give first priority to questions that you have for me. All right. But if nobody has any questions, then what I like to do is concentrate on some of the more difficult things that you're going to see on the school test and the state test. So does anybody have anything you'd like me to talk about? Okay. Then what I think I should do is I think I should jump in with some math because math is, for most people, they find it the most challenging. And even people who are fantastic at math don't necessarily know what the questions are going to be on the test. So let's see. I have some math notes for my little self here. And let me see if I can find a good one. Okay, here's one that is on the state test. It might also be on the school test as well. And it looks like it's really hard, and it's not. It's so easy. Wait till you see this. Mortgage balance is $140,000 at 6% interest. What is the dollar amount of interest payment this month? Now, I'm starting to get a reflection here. Did we do this one already? Did we do this one last week? I teach so many classes that sometimes I forget what I might have done last week. But if we did do it last week, then everybody who's here should be able to get the answer pretty easily, right? If not, if I didn't do it last week, let's find the solution right now. Now, it looks like it's going to be really hard, but you know what it is? It is third grade arithmetic. In third grade, they teach us how to multiply. All we are going to do, all we are going to do is multiply the principal, which of course is the balance, times the interest. But that gives us annual interest. And the question asked about this month. So we divide by 12 months. So here we go. $140,000 mortgage balance times 6% interest divided by 12 months equals $700 interest this month. Now, those are not the real numbers that are on the school and state test. So I've got, this week I don't have quite as fancy a calculator as I usually do. I have an El Cheapo that you get from the dollar store, and you can take it with you to the New York State test. Okay. Try it when you're home. Like, we won't do it now, but when you're home, try it with some other numbers, because the numbers that I just gave you are not numbers that you will see on the test. So try this question with 150,000 mortgage principal and 6% interest. you still want to find out the interest this month. Okay, that didn't hurt so bad. So let's see if we can try another math question. Okay. Forgive me for a second. I just noticed that I was getting a communication from the school and I had to make sure that it wasn't something urgent. All right, let's do the next one. I think we should do one about graduated commission because that is almost always on the state test. So let me see if I can find it. Okay, I'm going to type it for you now. Thank you for bearing with me. I found the question. Okay. Um, a broker signs a listing contract which says that commission will be 3% of the first 500,000 of the sale price. After that, any amount above 500,000 will be paid at a commission rate of 4%. The building sells for 900,000. How much is total commission? Now, first and foremost, let me explain why you would do this. You don't really see graduated commission very often in residential rentals, and you don't see it very often in most residential sales. Where you do see it is you see it in very large residential sales, or you see it in commercial. Because think about it this way. Let's say that you are selling a home for $10 million. Okay. I don't think there are very many sellers who are going to be too happy about paying you a 5% or 6% commission of $10 million. Because what is that going to be? That's going to be what, like $500,000 commission? They're not going to be so thrilled about doing that. So I'm just checking to make sure my decimal places are right. Yep, that's right. So they're not going to want to pay that. So what they do is they pay you a lower rate, but they want to incentivize you to get as much money for the property as possible. Because what if you could get 11 million for it? What if you could get 12 million for it? So they might say something like, for the first 5 million that you sell the place, we'll give you 3%. But if you get more than that, we'll give you 4% of the remainder. So they do it as an incentive to sell the property for more money. All right. So we have some newcomers. Hello, welcome. We are doing a math question, and I'm going to put the math question into the chat again for the people who just joined us. Okay, so here's the question that we are working on. A broker signs a listing contract which says that commission will be 3% of the first 500,000 of the sale price. After that, any amount above 500,000 will be paid at a commission rate of 4%. The building sells for 900,000. How much is the total commission? Okay, now Carrie's got an answer already. I'm not sure if it's the right answer or not because I'm not peeking. I'm going to do it along with you. All right. So 500,000 sale price times 3% commission equals that's going to be what, 15,000? Am I right? I'm pretty good at math, but I always have trouble with the decimal places. Yeah, that's going to be 15,000. So that's 15,000 partial commission. Then we say 400,000 remaining sale price, because the sale price was 900,000. So 500,000 plus 400,000 is the total sale price, which was 900,000. Okay, so 400,000 remaining sale price times 4% commission equals, that should be 16,000, shouldn't it? Then we add the two partial commissions together. It's looking to me like Carrie's right. 15,000 plus 16,000 equals 31,000 total commission. Answer is 31,000. All right. Let's try another math question. Does everybody feel comfortable with ERV? Because I was kind of going through my notes and I was noticing that there is an ERV question on both the school test and the state test. Do people feel comfortable with ERV, or shall we try an ERV question? And if nobody says anything, I'll just do it. Okay, here is a question that is similar to what you will probably see on the school test. Okay, good. All right. I like it when people say they don't know something because it shows that we're doing something worthwhile in this class. Because the whole point of this class is to tell you stuff you don't already know. So ERV is an equation that we use all the time in commercial real estate. And it's based on the idea that value of a building is determined by the building's income. Okay. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. If I wanted to sell you a commercial building and I said, hey, would you like to buy this building? You probably wouldn't say, is the building pretty? Or will my mother like it? Or, is it in a scenic location? You don't care. You know what you care? If I buy the building, how much money will I make? You care what your home looks like. You might care what your office looks like, but you certainly don't care what an investment building looks like. The only thing you're going to do is run the building and make income off of it. So what you care about most is, if I buy the building, how much income will I make? That's what's important to you. Okay, so ERV is an equation that we can use. ERV is an equation we use all the time to take a building's income and use it to find the building's market value. So what ERV stands for, ERV stands for income divided by rate of return equals value. The income we are talking about is always the building's annual net operating income, which Department of State likes to call, and everybody else calls it that too, likes to call NOI. Value is, well, it could be market value, or it could be the value to the investor. Okay, so value is how much the building should sell for. And rate of return is the ratio that compares how much a person invests compared to how much income they get. Now, that probably doesn't sound very clear. So let's talk about what I mean by that, okay? Let's say that I go to the bank. And actually, I should tell you something funny. When I was a young person, I was kind of stupid. And I didn't really know that you could invest your money. And so I was so proud of myself. I scrimped and saved, and I lived a very frugal life. And I saved up all this money, and I had $75,000 in my savings account at the bank. And I went to the bank, and the banker goes to me, "Are you insane?" And I go, "What?" And the banker goes, "You have $75,000 in a savings account? Do you have any idea what the rate of return is on this savings account?" And I go, "No." And she goes, "Like 3%. Like, take your money out of there, invest it somewhere, put it in the stock market, put it in mutual funds, put it in something, but don't put it in an investment that has a really, really low rate of return." Okay, so we know that a bank account has a very, very low rate of return. But what about real estate? How do we know what the rate of return is on real estate? Well, it's easy to find out because you know what? It's market data. So we can do internet research. We can read the Wall Street Journal. We can listen to 1010 Wins. They report on this kind of stuff all the time in their business reports. And if all else fails, you just freaking ask somebody. So I'll give you an example. One time I was teaching, and I happened to be teaching near at a location in near Grand Central. Okay. And I said to my students, you know, I don't happen to sell Class C buildings near Grand Central. Can you please tell me what would be the rate of return for an investor on a Class C building in Midtown? And they said to me, I don't know, probably about 3%. So if you ask somebody, they will tell you. Now, what if I said to them, well, I don't want something that rich. You know, I don't want like a great big, huge, valuable building, you know, worth $60 million in the middle of Manhattan. I want something more modest. I want to buy a hotel in Buffalo. Well, then my rate of return might be 8%, 10%, you know, so that can happen. All right. So now that we know what is the meaning of ERV, you don't really have to worry too much about the meaning of ERV because they're going to tell you. In the question, they're going to tell you, here's the income, here's the rate of return, and here's the value. So you are going to recognize an IRV math question when you see words like net income, NOI, rate of return, or sometimes they call it the cap rate. When you see those words, you see the I in IRV, and you see the R in IRV, and you know that V is value. So now that we've explained it, let's do the question. A building has 20 apartments renting for $750 per month. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot something. Let me do that again. I forgot to tell you what the expenses are. Okay, so expenses. Okay, there we go. There's the correct question. A building has 20 apartments renting for $750 per month. Expenses are $80,000 per year. Cap rate in the area for that product is 6.5%. What is the value? All right. Now, they are trying to trick us. They are trying to trick us because we know that the I in IRV, the income in IRV, is always net income. And in this question, they give us the gross income. So we have to figure out the net income. So let's get the net income. So $750 times 12 months times 20 apartments equals, and if everybody's doing it along with me, I hope you get the same number that I do. 750 times 12 times 20 equals 1,080,000 is what I got. Okay. Now, to get the net income, all we do is subtract expenses. And they said the expenses were 80,000. Oh, nice round number, huh? That doesn't seem right. Oh, you're going to hate me. It's 800,000 expenses. It's 800,000 expenses. All right, so let me correct that for you because that looked a little weird to me. All right, so let me fix that. Okay, so if we take 1,000,080 and we subtract 1,080,000 minus 800,000 equals 280,000. Okay. Now, everybody is being very silent, and I know that I forgot a zero in the expenses. So, is everyone following me? Are you with me so far? Yeah. Okay. What we did is we took the income on the apartments and we multiplied it by 12 months to figure out the annual gross income. Then we subtracted the expenses. Now we have the NOI. Okay. So once we have NOI, we can do IRV. So income is 280,000. Divided by 6.5% rate of return. Is that what it was? Yes. 6.5% rate of return equals, and we'll get the value of the building. I get $4,307,000. Okay. Does everybody see how I did that? I think we might want to try another IRV question, honestly, because I think that one was a little confusing. But since everybody understands the concept of IRV, and I promise you, IRV is on both the school and the state tests. So, okay, here we have one. Building's value is $650,000 and cap rate is 12%. What is net operating income? Okay, so we know that I divided by R equals V. The income, which we don't know, divided by 12% equals 650,000 value. Now it's time for us to go back to high school, because there's a couple of things that we remember from high school. And one thing we remember is that when you have an equal sign, it means that both sides of the equation are equal to each other. So if I took one side of the equation and divided it by 5, I would have to divide the other side of the equation by 5 in order to keep them equal. That's the one thing we remember from school. The other thing we remember from school is that if you don't know something, you want to get it by itself. All right. So let me write those two principles for you. We remember two things from high school math. Okay. One, an equal sign means both sides of the equation have to stay the same. If, for example, we multiply one side by 5, we have to multiply the other side by 5. The second thing we remember is that if we don't know something, we try to get it alone on one side of the equation. So in this case, we don't know income. We want income to be by itself. So in this case, we want income to be by itself. Now, what we could do is on one side of the equation, we have income times 12%. What if we said income times 12% divided by 12%? Well, times 12% divided by 12% doesn't do anything. It leaves the income by itself. So if we said income divided by 12% times 12%, that equals income. We have to do the same thing to the other side of the equation. So, income divided by 12% times 12% equals 650,000 value times 12%. And we get $780,000. Okay. Did that make sense to everybody? Good, good, good. Jonathan, are you good at math? Are you one of those smart skis that's good at math? Okay. Now, let's say we want to check our work. Let's say we want to check our work. We can just do IRV again. So income, which we know is 78,000, divided by 12%, it should equal 650,000, shouldn't it? And sure enough, it does. The equation works, so our answer was right. The equation works, so our answer was right. Now, let's see if we can move on to another subject besides math. I think we should try doing a couple of questions on co-ops and condos. I had somebody the other day who said that that was their weakest part when they did the lecture tests in school. By the way, while I'm getting this question ready, I'm curious to know how people like the exam readiness meter. Do you like the exam readiness meter? I personally love it. I've never seen a school that has it. This is the first school I've seen that has the exam readiness meter. And I really love it. And I've been asking some of the students uh, how accurate, like I have some students who go and they take the test. And I ask them, how accurate did the exam readiness meter turn out to be? And amazingly, it's been very accurate. Like, for example, I have students who, like I had one student who said that her exam readiness meter was 82 and she got an 85 on the school test. So generally speaking, I have not yet had a student who told me that the exam readiness meter was like totally wrong or something like that. Oh, okay, you're taking the state exam this week. Very good. Okay, well, don't worry, we will do plenty of state exam questions. We're doing both state and school questions. So let me give you your choices for this upcoming question. What is CPS 1? An appraisal, another name for house rules, an application to test the market, or a share loan document? What's the answer? Thank you. Absolutely right. The answer is application to test the market. Now, does everybody know why that is, or would you like me to talk about it a little bit? Would you like me to talk about the CPS 1? Sure, gladly. Okay. Our state government wants to protect consumers. And let me tell you what they don't want to have happen. Okay. They don't want um, greedy builders, the greedy developers, they call them, to charge people too much money for their apartments. Okay. So for example, there are two ways that you can make a co-op or a condo. You can build one, or you can take a rental building and convert it to a co-op or a condo. So let's say that I live in a rental building and my landlord comes to me and says, we're converting this to a co-op. Would you like to buy the apartment that you live in? And I go, oh yeah, I really want to buy it. And the landlord says, okay, that'll be $8 million. Well, that's the same as evicting me, isn't it? So what the state government wants to do is they want to check all the prices to make sure that they're fair. So let me type that into the chat, okay? For co-ops and condos, New York State government wants to be sure prices are fair to consumers. Now, I just saw Letitia James on TV today, and it's so weird. It was funny because I had never heard her talk. I've read interviews with her, I've seen pictures of her, but I've never put two and two together and actually heard her talk. Anyway, so Letitia James is sitting in Albany. How does she know what are fair prices in Tribeca? She doesn't. So to prove to New York State Attorney General which prices are fair, the person or company who creates the co-op or condo, which we call the sponsor, does market research. The state form used for the market price research is called Cooperative policy statement. 1. And if you're cool, you call it CPS 1. Okay, so it is exactly that. It is an application to state government to test fair market prices. Okay, all right, let's do some more. Oh, there's a lot of construction questions on the test. Let's do a construction one. What is the overhang of a sloping roof that extends beyond the walls? This one is on both the school test and the state test. And I'm telling you, when Jonathan goes to take his test this week, he's going to hear my voice in his head because he's going to see all these questions that I promised were on both the school test and the state test. Now, where does everybody else stand? Have people taken your school test, or are we here studying for the school test, or are we studying primarily for the state test? Okay, what is the overhang of a sloping roof that extends beyond the walls? Cladding, eave, header, or facing? Okay, Rialta is both. Header or facing. Okay, so what's the answer? Oh, looks like I have I have people stumped a little bit. Okay, well, let's talk about it. The eave. Now, here's my wall. This is the inside of my house. This is the outside of my house. Here's my roof. This thing is the eave. Okay, so the purpose of the eave is so that the rain and the snow, they don't like go down the walls of the building, they go out over and drip down. Okay, so if you ever, like in the wintertime, if you ever see a house and it's got icicles on it, the icicles are hanging on the eave. All right, now, if you, let me type that. If you see a house in winter, the icicles are hanging off the eave. And by the way, that's where the word eavesdropper comes from. Eavesdroppers are people who listen in on your conversations, right? Because the idea was that they would hang around on your roof, listening into your bedroom. They would hang around on your eave, listening into your bedroom for your private conversations. Let's see if we can do an easier one here. Ah, here's one. This is definitely on both the school test and the state test. What lease is used for unfinished space not divided into rooms and used for storage or warehouse? And I will give you choices. Okay, which kind of lease? A flex lease, a loft lease, a net lease, or a percentage lease? What's the answer? And you can either unmute yourself and call out the answer, or you can type it into the chat, whichever you prefer. Absolutely right. Answer is a loft lease. And the reason why is they are describing a loft and then asking what kind of lease. Okay, so it's kind of a clear question. It's unfinished space not divided into rooms and used for storage or warehouse. That's what a loft is. Now, sometimes people take lofts and convert them to offices or stores or homes or something like that, but they originally were built for storage or warehouse. How do people feel about commercial? Do you feel strong about commercial, or do you feel that I should go into it a little more? What best describes a co-op buyer's interest? And your choices are, let me get them to you. And of these choices, I would like you to be really certain that you understand all about leasehold, freehold, and joint ownership. And if people don't feel comfortable with it, just tell me and I'll talk about it. Okay. But yes, Rialta is absolutely right. A co-op, a co-op buyer has leasehold. Okay. Do people want me to talk about leasehold and freehold, or does everybody feel comfortable with it? Okay. Leasehold means you own, and I'm sorry, leasehold means you lease. Leasehold means you lease, and freehold means you own. There are 4 kinds of leasehold and 3 kinds of freehold. So let's go through the 4 kinds of leasehold first. Okay, the kinds of leasehold are 1, 4 years. And that means lease has a definite end date. It could be less than a year. The second one is periodic. Lease automatically renews every month unless landlord or tenant cancel. Most common example is month-to-month lease. The third one is at will, and that is when a person takes up tenancy, usually with their family or extremely close friend, and no particular time is specified, no particular rent is specified, but they are a tenant. And then fourth, and the at will, as I said, it's very common among families, or friends or something. Like I did an at will once because I had a friend who lost everything she owned in Hurricane Katrina, and she had nowhere to stay. And she said, "Look, Kristen, let me come up and stay with you, and I will pay you a little something when I get my insurance settled, but I'm not getting my insurance settlement right away." Okay, so I go, "Fine." She was like my best friend. Okay, so I said, "Come on up." So she came up and she was staying with me. We didn't know how long. We didn't know how long till she could get her insurance money and go home and fix up her house again. We didn't know how much. we didn't know how much her insurance settlement was going to be. We didn't know how much she could afford to pay me, if anything. So that would be what we call a leasehold at will. And then the very last one, the fourth kind of leasehold, is at sufferance. And sufferance is when tenants, is when the lease expires, but tenant doesn't move out. Landlord is suffering because they have an illegal tenant, and the only way to get rid of them is to evict them. And eviction is a terrible process, as you well know. So let me give you these notes. I'm going to hit enter on these notes. Okay, now let's do freehold. Okay, now the kinds of freehold. It's also a town in New Jersey, isn't it? Isn't there a town in New Jersey called Freehold, New Jersey? The kinds of freehold are: one, fee simple. It is standard, ordinary ownership, where owner has full legal rights of ownership. It is overwhelmingly the most common ownership in the US. The other two kinds of ownership are extremely rare. Now, at this point, I always go full stop, enter, full stop, because for some reason, people have trouble remembering fee simple. And I guess just because it's simple. The other kinds of ownership are much more complicated and much more rare. So what most of the textbooks do, and not, by the way, my textbook, sometimes students ask me if this course has a textbook. And the fact is, this course does have a textbook. Okay, I wrote a textbook for this course, and it has everything in it that your course has in it, but it has about twice the material. Okay, so it has double the content. Now, what I like about RELNY, well, there are many things I like about RELNY, but one of the things I like about RELNY is that they don't make you buy a textbook. Like, I've taught in schools where they make the students buy a textbook for like $50, and RELNY doesn't do that. RELNY makes the class transcripts available for free. So if you wanted to, you could download every single word that I say in the class, and you'd essentially have the textbook, except that, first of all, that's a lot of trouble to go to and a lot of paper. But also my textbook has about twice as much material. So if you're interested in a textbook for the school always says to me, like, be sure the students know that we do have a textbook, but we don't make them buy it. All right. So, well, Jonathan, I just did give an example of an at-will. My friend who came from down south when her house got destroyed in Hurricane Katrina, and she came up, and I said, look, you can stay with me until you get your insurance money. And she said, oh, I'll pay you rent. I'll pay you rent. I go, fine. But we didn't know how long she was staying, and we didn't know how much money she was going to have, and how much rent she could pay me. Turns out she didn't pay me a thing. But I didn't care. She was my best friend, so I didn't really care, you know? Okay, so the other kinds of freehold, all right? So the other kinds of freehold are conditional, and that means that the person only owns the real estate if they fulfill a certain condition, like they use it as a daycare center or something like that. If they don't fulfill the condition, they lose ownership. And then the last kind is a life estate. The person only owns the real estate for their lifetime. When they die, the real estate does not go to their heirs, but to someone else or another company, or a company maybe, could be a person or a company, which is called the remainder man. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm going to buy real estate, give me freehold. I want all the legal rights. I don't want anybody taking it away from me. I want to decide what happens to it when I die. So, of the three kinds of freehold, you definitely want fee simple. Okay, so now that we've done it, let's do some questions. Let's do some questions about this. Here's a question that is on both school test and state test. Almost everything I've given you today is on both tests. What is the highest and most complete form of freehold? And I will give you choices. So your choices are estate for years, estate at will, fee simple, or life estate. Thank you. Rialta's got it going on. She had the answer before she even saw the choices. So that's pretty darn good. Okay, and Jonathan's got it too. Okay, beautiful. So the answer is fee simple. That's always on the test. Now, here's one that is a similar question that you're going to see on the state test. Unless it is a lesser estate in which the owner has fewer legal rights, what kind of freehold is it? And we're going to have the same choices as before. So is it an estate for years, estate at will, fee simple, or life estate? Thank you. The answer is once again fee simple. So fee simple is a full estate because you have the full legal rights. A life estate or conditional is a lesser estate because you have less legal rights. Okay, so answer is fee simple again. Okay. Oh, here's one. This is on both the school and the state test, but I think you'll find it pretty easy. Wait, can I go vote that one? Well, I'm sorry, you want me to read it again? It says vote that one. So, oh, go over it. I just was getting the over because it had a V in it. And then you typed over at the same time that like we were together at the same wavelength. Can I go over that one again? Yeah, I'll type it for you, in fact. Okay. Because see, the whole idea is that these class notes are something that you're going to be able to keep and use. Okay. So fee simple is called a full estate because the owner has full legal rights of ownership. Conditional and life estate are lesser estates because the owner has less legal rights. For example, in conditional, the owner can't decide how to use the building. Someone else is telling them. And in life estate, the owner can't sell the building or give it away or will it to an heir. That is certainly a lack of legal rights. Okay, so in a lesser estate, you have less legal rights. Okay. Unless specified otherwise, it is assumed that spouses will take ownership as what tenancy. So we've spoken about fee simple. So let's say that a married couple is going to own they're going to own a property in fee simple. Okay, fine. So now we have to figure out, do they own it together as a married couple? Does one of the couple own it in severalty by themselves? Do they own it with somebody else that they're not married to? Like, how does that happen, right? So here are your choices. So they're asking you, how does a married couple take ownership in freehold, in fee simple freehold? Now, you will notice that Department of State is a little bit old-fashioned because like on the school test, they say, how does a married couple, or how do spouses, or something like that, right? But on the state test, they call it a husband and wife. So that's why I keep telling everybody that they wrote the state test decades ago and they never change it. Okay, so the answer is indeed entirety. So the answer is entirety. Now, so far, everybody is getting all the answers right. So you people must have some pretty good exam readiness meters. All right, let's do some more. Now,
I have a question. Sorry.
of course.
If it's an entirety and let's say the husband then dies, then the house goes to the wife.
Uh-huh.
And if the wife dies first, then the house goes to the husband. But what happens if they're like they're both, it's their second marriage and they each have their own set of kids? Who does and let's say there's no will, who does the house go to? Does it go to the person who dictates which kids get the house? Do you understand my question? Meaning, like, if there's no will, is it whoever dies first, whoever's left remaining gets to determine who they give the house to? Or is it?
Yes. Now, funny you should ask that because there is an episode of Law and Order with that exact plot. Okay.
Okay.
Do people like the show Law and Order? Do you like it?
I like it.
Okay. Well, so you know, Law and Order is a murder mystery. Okay. So every week they have a murder mystery. And what happened was it was a husband and wife, and they each had children. Yeah, I love that show. They had children from previous marriages. Okay. So the husband and wife got murdered. And the what they were trying to do is they were trying to figure out which one of them died first. Because if the mother died first, her kid was going to get the house. If the father died first, no, I'm sorry. Okay. If the mother died first, the house goes to her husband and then goes to the husband's kid. If the father died first, the house goes to the mother and then to the mother's kid. Now, the mother may inherit the house for only a few seconds, but that's exactly what happened in the plot.
So it goes to the kids of the parent that dies first,
The parent that died last.
that died last.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
that's only if there's no will.
Only for what?
And that's only if there's no will.
Well, yeah, because I suppose, like, okay, in this story, the father died first, and the mother died like a couple of minutes later, and the mother inherited the house. Now, if the mother had wanted to disinherit her kid, the mother could have written a will saying, I don't want my real estate to be inherited by my son. She could do that if she wanted to.
And then if you did dictate it that you wanted to go to one parent's kids, is that called a remainder man? Because that was one of the vocabulary words.
Now, the remainder man is for the life estate.
So that's while they're alive.
Well, no,
They
the
can.
remainder man has nothing to do with fee simple. The remainder man is only for the life estate. So the idea with the life estate is that, like, I might say, well, if I die, I want my house to be inherited by my boyfriend. And then after my boyfriend dies, it doesn't go to his kids or his family. After my boyfriend dies, the house goes to World Wildlife Fund. So World Wildlife Fund is the remainder man. So let me type that for you. Remainder man is the person or company who inherits real estate after life tenant dies. The word is only used with life estates, never with fee simple.
I see. So the only way to dictate, I got it. The only way to dictate who the house goes to is by having a will, I guess.
Correct. Now, just so you know, this is not on the test, but I'm telling you for your interest that in New York State, you're not allowed to completely disinherit your spouse. Like, you can't write a will saying my spouse doesn't get a single penny. If you're still married to them, they're going to get something when you die. You're not allowed to completely. You can disinherit your children, but you can't completely disinherit your spouse. If you want to completely disinherit them, then you have to divorce them. Okay. Now, you can give them the bare minimum. You don't have to give them like everything you own. But
That should be for children as well.
yeah, probably should. Leona Helmsley disinherited her own children. She used to own Empire State Building. And she disinherited her own children. She gave her dog $12 million. That was in the course, I think. Okay. I mean, cuckoo, right? All right, let's do some more. So these are interesting questions, but you don't have to worry because they won't be on the test. Okay. We should probably do some fair housing ones. But before we do that, let's do an agency question. So far, everything I'm giving you is on both the school test and the state test, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is that schools try to make their exams as much like the state exam as they can, because like Department of State is our bosses, and we're supposed to do what our bosses tell us. So if a boss thinks, if our boss thinks that something is important enough to put on the test, we're going to follow their lead and put it on our school test as well. So you will find that the school test and the state test are really quite similar. Okay. At what point must a salesperson deliver agency disclosure form? First, substantive contact, after delivering real estate services, upon signing a contract with the client, or when an offer for sale or rent is received. Okay, everybody has it right. Now, Deep T is correct that it's got to be before signing the contract, but that's not one of the choices. The correct choice on the test is when you first meet them. Before you deliver any real estate services. So the answer is A, first substantive contact. Now, while we're on this subject of the state test and the agency disclosure form, there is a question on the test that I really don't like, to tell you the truth. And I will give it to you right now. I'll tell you why I don't like it. The reason I don't like it is because they wrote the state test like 40 years ago and they never change it. So some of the stuff is kind of old-fashioned. Okay, here we go. Which of the following scenarios best illustrates the first substantive contact with a prospective buyer? A couple who calls a real estate office asking about location of an advertised property. B, people in an open house who did not speak to the agent. C, an agent giving a seminar on home buying. Or D, an individual meeting with an agent and discussing the purchase of a specific property. So what's the answer? Thank you. The answer is D. Okay, Department of State, who we think of as DOS, still thinks of first substantive contact as being the first time you meet somebody in person to discuss a particular property. Now, I told you I don't like this question. You know why I don't like this question? Because I think that A is right too. Okay, because what if the person calls on the phone and says, so where's the property? What does it look like? Is the owner negotiable? Does it have good school districts? How many bedrooms? Blah, 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 blah. That feels to me like a pretty substantive contact. They're asking me for my advice, my opinions. They're asking for additional information. That to me is the first substantive contact, but it's happening on the phone. So think about it. 40 years ago would have been like the 1980s, right? So in the 1980s, what kind of electronics did we have? We didn't have Skype. We didn't have FaceTime. We didn't have fax machines. We didn't have cell phones. I mean, we didn't have any of the stuff. Pretty much the only electronics we had back in those days is we had TV, radio, and telephones, and that was pretty much it. Nowadays, we have instant messaging and email and, DMs and all this kind of stuff, and all kinds of social media platforms and all kinds of stuff that was unimaginable when DOS wrote the test. So the new guidance is that first substantive contact can be electronic. So I'm gonna write it here for you, okay? In real life, first substantive contact can be electronic. But on the test, it is face to face in person. Okay? All right. Here's a question. Yet again, it's on both school and state. I think almost everyone that I've given you is on both tests. So which characteristic has to do with liens? And here are your choices. Oh, say, while I'm getting these choices ready, may I ask you something? Is this supposed to be an hour-long class or a 90-minute class? In other words, am I going overtime? Oh, it's supposed to be 1 hour. Okay. Because what happened was the school wrote me today and they said, Kristen, you always go overtime, don't you? I go, yeah, I do. Like, I don't know why, but I get so caught up with the students and I feel like an hour isn't enough. And so they said, tell you what, how about if we lengthen the class to 90 minutes? Okay. So I don't know if they lengthened it yet or if they're gonna do it in the future. But if it's okay with everybody, I'll keep going until 7:30. Is that good with people? Thank you. I agree, Lisa. I don't think an hour is enough. I think with an hour, yeah, with an hour, we're just getting going. So yeah, I agree with you. So the answer is that a lien is a debt placed on real estate. Okay. Okay, here's one for you. This is the state test. I don't think it's on the school test. Who usually holds the down payment, which sometimes they call the earnest money deposit? Now, I didn't put that parenthesis in there. Department of State put that parenthesis in there where it says earnest money deposit, okay? So who usually holds the down payment? Seller's agent, buyer's attorney, or seller's attorney? What's the answer? Thank you. Answer is D, seller's attorney. Now, the reason for this is interesting. In a lot of states, when people are going to buy a property and they sign a contract and they make a deposit, they hand the deposit check to the broker, not in New York. New York is different than all the other states. And the reason we're different is that in New York, everybody who is a lawyer, who is a member of New York State Bar, they when they pay their bar dues every year, a little bit of that money goes into an insurance fund. It's called New York Lawyers Fund. And New York Lawyers Fund is insurance for any member of the public who has a financial loss because an attorney does something wrong. So if I have a choice, if I'm gonna write a check for $100,000, And I have a choice of giving it to a broker who could lose it and then I have to sue them or something, or an attorney who, if he loses it, this insurance fund is going to repay me. I'm giving it to the attorney, right? So that's why people in New York State always give deposits to attorneys. Okay. What happens in the secondary mortgage market? What happens in the secondary mortgage market? FHA loans are made to consumers. Conventional loans are originated. Mortgages and bonds are sold to investors, or home equity loans may be obtained. 3 of these, they're describing the primary market. Only 1 of these is the secondary market. Okay, so let me give you the answer. Okay, now, primary market is where banks sell mortgages to people. Okay, so that could include a first mortgage, second mortgage, which would be a second, or they call it a junior mortgage, a home equity loan, etc. Conventional loans are bank loans to ordinary consumers. Secondary market, banks sell mortgages to the government and investors. So ordinary people like you and me can't really go in and buy stuff on the secondary market, because what they do is they package them together. They'll put like 1,000 mortgages together and sell them to some huge investment syndicate, or sell them to the government or something. So like ordinary people like you and me don't really participate in the secondary market. Oh, here's one that I think you're going to find pretty easy. It's on both the school test and the state test. What type of easement is granted to utility companies to maintain power lines? And here are your choices. People like the choices. Everybody likes the choices. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. So the answer to the question about secondary market is that is where, let me get the exact wording of the question. Mortgages and bonds are sold to investors. So that was choice C. Okay. So what type of easement is granted to utility companies to maintain electric power lines? Thank you. Everybody's got that right. So government or utilities have easement in gross. That actually happened to me today. There was a outage in my neighborhood and like nobody had internet. And the guy rang my doorbell and I came to the door and he was dressed in his like official Spectrum uniform. And he goes, I need to go up on your roof. And I knew to let him in because I had met that technician before, so I didn't ask for his badge or anything. I just let him come in and go up on the roof. He had all his equipment with him and stuff. So that would be an example of an easement in gross. That guy has the right. Like I could probably ask him for identification, but I don't have the right to tell him he can't come in the building. He has the legal right to come in my building. He has an easement to use my building. All right. What is it called when buyers and sellers allocate certain closing costs on a balance sheet, such as taxes or fuel? This is on both the school test and the state test. And here are your choices: consideration, conveyance, proration, subordination. What's the answer? And by the way, on the test, subordination is always wrong. Don't ever choose subordination if you see it on the test. Thank you. Answer is C, proration. All right, let's see what else we might have from the state test. Oh, here's a really hard one, in my opinion. This is from the state test. Oh, you don't know what proration is? Okay, I'll tell you quickly what proration is. Okay, proration is, let's pretend, let's say you are selling a house to me for 1 million. We go to the closing and I pay 1 million. But you have 275 gallons of heating oil in the basement. Shouldn't I pay you for that? That might be worth, a couple of $1,000. Okay. So prorations are little financial adjustments for things like paying for the heating oil downstairs. Okay. All right, let's do another one. An existing property use that was once lawfully established and is not now consistent with current regulations, but is allowed to remain in its present use is officially referred to as non-bearing, non-exclusive, non-conventional, or non-conforming. Okay, the answer is non-conforming. Now, let me tell you why. Okay. Now, let's say that Sam opens a store, okay? Let's say Sam opens a store. Then the city changes the neighborhood zoning to residential only. Can Sam's store stay? Yes, because it was there before the law. It doesn't conform to the present law, but it is still legal. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you something interesting. You don't have to know, it's not on the test. I'm just telling you something interesting. Okay. In New York City, we had two major zoning resolutions. Okay. The first one was in 1916, and the second one was in 1961. Okay. And 1916 was the first time we ever had zoning in our city. Okay. Because before that, like they cared about stuff, like they cared about fire codes and sanitation codes and stuff like that. They cared about building codes, but they didn't have any rules about what you could use a building for, or how big the building had to be, or how many windows it had to have, or something like that. There were no rules about stuff like that until 1916. Now, in 1916, that was when they came up with the rule. They call it the wedding cake rule, because like it used to be that if somebody wanted to build a 40-story building, they would just build a 40-story building, just straight up. Then they said, well, wait a second, New York City isn't getting any more light. We're not getting any more air anymore. So what buildings have to do is they have to set back. Okay, so the building goes up, goes back, gets thinner, goes up, goes back, gets thinner. So it looks like a wedding cake with the tears on the wedding cake. Now, if a building was built before 1916, what are they going to do? Tear it down? Of course not. So there are tons of those old buildings that still exist. And New York Times did a study a few years ago, and they found out that in Manhattan, about 40% of the buildings in Manhattan are non-conforming. Isn't that amazing? Okay, I have the time as 7:30, but everybody is sticking with me. So let's do one or two more before we finish for the evening. Oh, here's one. This one is on both the school test and the state test, and I really don't like this question at all. After I show it to you, non-conventional. Okay, a conventional loan is a regular, plain, old bank loan with no government insurance. A non-conventional loan is when bank tells me they will not lend me any money unless I get mortgage insurance from FHA or VA or somebody like that. Okay. Now, I'm glad that you're asking these questions, because these questions benefit everybody. And every time you ask a question, it stimulates me to just put more notes into the chat. So that's a good thing. It's a good thing to ask these kind of questions, or to encourage me to explore certain subjects. Okay. Where is asbestos typically found in a home? In basement floors, around pipes and furnaces, within blown-in insulation, or inside old radiators. Now, everybody's getting the answer right, so I think that's good. Okay, so the answer is be the furnaces? The reason I don't like this question is that 50 or 100 years ago, they used asbestos in everything. They used it in insulation. They used it in radiators. They used it in flooring. They used it in shingles. They used it in freaking everything. So, answer B is the best answer because asbestos stops fire. And what does a building have in the basement that is a great big metal box with fire inside? The answer is a furnace. Okay. Let's try and do one more. Let's do another one of these construction questions. What are horizontal parallel boards used for floor and ceiling framing? Headers, rafters, joists, or posts? So in other words, what do you call the beams in a floor or the beams in a ceiling? Because my ceiling is somebody else's floor. Thank you very much, Carrie. The answer is joists. Joists are floor or ceiling beams. That's okay. I knew what you meant. I do typos my own self in case you didn't notice. All right. So I have the time as 7:36. So I think we better knock off. But before I go, I do want to ask you, um, and I ask this every week, but it's always the same question, but um, I would love it if people would review the school because this is the best school that I ever taught for. I freaking love this school, and this school has only been around for a year, and they're kind of trying to Carrie, before you go, leave me your email address. Very good. They're kind of trying to get
I
off.
can't put my email in.
You can't? Well, then
Sorry.
tell me what it is.
It's you sent me it last week because I've been joining the last 2-3 weeks. It's sherry.dilmagani@gmail.com.
Okay.
So it's
How do you spell Sherry?
SHERI.
How do you spell Sherry?
SHERI
Okay.
dot, and then my last name is Dilmagani, D like
Okay.
David, ILMAGHAN as in Nancy, I at
Mhm.
gmail.com. Sorry, it's long.
Okay. Great. No, don't worry. Okay, we got you. Okay. So I would love it if people would go. I just gave you the link for the Facebook. If you would go and say something nice about the school. Um, because they've only been in business for a year and they're really trying to get off the ground. So anything that we can do to help them, I already reviewed them, so I can't review them again. But that would be great. Now, somebody asked if I would do a private session. I do private tutoring, but you don't arrange it through me, you arrange it through the school. So you can write. Does anybody know Deb? Do you know Deb?
Yeah, she's really nice.
Isn't she
Very helpful.
wonderful? I love Deb.
Yes.
Deb is the she's our customer care rep. Huh? Okay. So if you would like to organize like an individual class with me, you can. You just have to do it through Deb. Okay. And I just gave you Deb's email address. Okay. So do I have Do I have everybody's email address? Because you know I'm going to email the notes to you as soon as we're done. Yeah, if you have any customer service problems, you can contact Deb. She's wonderful. I mean, a lot of students have told me, and I believe it, a lot of students have told me that they think that RELNY has the best customer service they've ever seen. I mean, I know because like other schools that I've taught at, they won't even help me when I need something, let alone the students. So Deb is
She's
very,
wonderful.
yeah, whenever I need something, she always helps me out. So yeah, you can rely on Deb. Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you a secret about the practice test for RELNY. The practice test for RELNY, what RELNY did is they just developed 4 tests. And then they took the questions and just scrambled them up. So there are 3 school tests. The 4th one is the practice test. So if you do well on the practice test, you should be able to do well on the final for the school because they're the same. And the notes that I send you for these sessions that we do together, those are solid gold. Because I don't make up these questions. I don't pull these questions out of my hat. These are the questions that are on the school test and the state test. Yes, I have a tip for the school test. The tip is that the way that they wrote the final exam is they took all the questions that you had in the lecture test and basically rewrote them and stuck them onto the final exams. So if you do well on the lecture test, you're going to be seeing the same questions on the final for the school.
Do you mean lecture tests or chapter tests?
Both lecture and chapter.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the tip that Jonathan gave of do the practice test for the school, that's another very good suggestion.
And is it the same advice for the state
Yeah,
exam
Jonathan
test?
said, no, listen to what Jonathan says. He goes, I suggest go over the final exams 3 to 4 times before the final. They're the same questions. That's what I just said, but he said it better than I did.
The final exam's on the dashboard?
I think you're referring to the chapter tests, right? The chapter finals. I think he's referring to the chapter finals. Yeah, because the final exam is based off of the lecture tests and the chapter tests.
Is
So
that the same tip for the state exam too, or no?
I'm
Is it
sorry?
the same? Is it the same tip? Would he give the same tip for the state exam, or would
Well,
you give the same advice?
state exam, the state exam, they have a bunch of different exams. They have like 8 of them, and they never retire them. Like it's impossible to find any old state exams. The state does not issue practice exams. They don't do anything like that. The best way to study for the state exam, in my opinion, is all the study that you're doing for the school. Because as I mentioned earlier, the school test and the state test, the questions are very similar. The only difference is that the school test has more math. And the reason the school test has more math is because we're required by law to have more math. Okay, so I mean, we'd love to have less math, but we're required by law to have a certain number of math questions. And then the other thing is that the state test is much more verbose. Like the language on the state test is kind of hard to read. Like that question I gave you a minute ago about the non-conforming, and it goes, what was an existing use lawfully established that would no longer be, they're very legalistic on the state test.
Open it.
Yeah, the state test, we probably only had like 2 or 3 math questions on the state test. The school test has a lot more math. And we've gone over most of the state math questions. Okay, yes. Let me give everybody, well, I think everybody has my email address, but let me give it to you again just for good measure. And you can let me know how the test goes. And anything that you want to ask me is fine. You can always write me and ask me stuff. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my camera and my microphone, but I'm going to leave the Zoom on so that I have a few minutes to process the notes and send them to everybody. All right. So I look forward to seeing people next week. Thank you very much and let me know how it goes. All right. Bye-bye.